Hello, welcome to Accountant's Minute podcast presented by ESS BIZTOOLS. I'm Peter Towers, founder and managing director of ESS BIZTOOLS. I hope you've had a wonderful day. Scale up SMEs with proven advisory essentials. We're looking in more depth tonight at the range of services that accountants and bookkeepers can supply to SMEs to assist them to operate efficient businesses which have the potential to scale up into significantly larger businesses. But that, of course, depends on the climate for attraction and risk and worry that your client has. Some people don't want to do that. They just want to run a reasonable business and earn a reasonable income from it. But others are keen to scale up. But whichever category your clients happen to be in, the key message that I want to give to you is that they all need your assistance. Because the businesses that want to be passive can get into great difficulties because they're not growing. You know, years ago, I had a couple of clients in the same industry. It's always a bit of a trap, but both of them knew that I was acting for the other one. And one of them was a very fast-growing business, millions of dollars on income, working for some of the major developers in the area. A staff of about 80 to 90 people. They were involved in the electrical trade, supplying all sorts of components that could generally be classified as being electrical. The other business was very small. It had been started by my client's father years ago and passed on to the son. There was no experiments being conducted. There was no new way of doing things other than what was probably contained in a government gazette that electricians had to change processes. And when I used to talk to him about his charge out rates, he'd say, "Oh, that's all right, I'm working all that out." And at the end of the year, we'd do a comparison. We'd do a benchmarking between both businesses. And I would point out to him that his charge out rates were significantly lower than the other business. Oh, that's because they're big and they've got big overhead costs. They probably pay you a lot of money. I say, "No, you're competing with them." "Oh, no, I'm not." I say, "Yes, you are." And because of this, he had a two-way radio that used to break down all the time, so communications with him in the field were difficult. He had no team as such. He had a young apprentice that left as soon as he could and actually got employment with the other business that I'm referring to. So the whole problem was we had a client that was just marking time, think they were keeping up, but in fact they were falling further and further behind. Their charge out rates were about 40% lower than the star competitor in the marketplace. This is one of the problems where people just say, "It's all right, we're not going to aspire to achieve anything. We're definitely not going to scale up." But they still need your encouragement to make sure that they're continuing to keep the business alive, that the sound processes that we've been talking about, and I know that you know that they're sound, are being implemented and continued with. So even though the clients got cash flow forecasts, budgets, and got key performance indicators system put in place so there can be comparison of performance. The data system's going great. There's a business plan and there's a rhythm of structured meetings, daily, weekly, monthly. It doesn't mean that you can sit back on your laurels and say, "Well, we've done everything we need to do for this business." That is not right. Because now it's time to start looking at the solid foundations to make sure that this growth, this benefits for this business will actually emerge. And then the owner or the directors of the business are going to have to make a decision. Do they continue to expand? Do they wish to go up on the scaling up exercise? Or do they want to remain small but not inefficient? They want to be efficient. They want the key performance indicators, the business metrics. They need the information so they can run a business that is able to be stable in the marketplace. So business health checks is a major area that we need to be concentrating on. And in my experience, as an accountant and also with working with accountants, primarily as a consultant, I found that business health checks are not high on the list. And as one accountant said to me one day in a major provincial city in a coffee lounge where I ran into him, it wasn't my brief to worry about key performance indicators in the client's accounts, because he said, Peter, I'm hired to prepare their tax return. I know I have to prepare financial accounts and a balance sheet for that, but I'm not being paid to analyse key performance indicators. Now, I was shocked when he said that to me, but I wonder what your reaction to that would be. Because I think it's very important that we look closely at figures. And the reason I was so shocked is that I had calculated one of the very important key performance indicators for that business. And the reason for that was I was conducting a seminar on corporate governance issues. And in the material that I was discussing, I'd referred to leadership teams and directors' responsibilities to monitor the debtors' balance outstanding. And I said that's normally then calculated as a debtors' days outstanding. And it's very important that the directors and the leadership team are monitoring that figure and making sure it's within the tolerance levels that have been established in the budgets, which hopefully the business had. Now, a lady in the audience, there's about 45 people there, put up a hand and said, well, can you tell me what the debtors' days outstanding should be? I said, well, that depends on your industry and a few other things. What's your business? She said, I don't know. She said, how do you calculate it? I looked at the back of the room and the caterers were getting ready for morning tea. We're just about ready. So I thought now's an appropriate time to have a break. So we broke for morning tea and I went up to this lady and I said, can you tell me a bit about your business? What's your turnover? She told me the turnover was quite a healthy turnover. And how much money you owed by debtors? Do you know that? Oh, yeah, I know that. I said, well, I'll calculate the debtors' days outstanding. And I was basically showing her how to do it. And I must have changed my expression on my face as I did the calculation because it was 102 days. And the lady said to me, oh, is it a bit high? I said, why? She said, oh, your face changed. I said, yeah, it is a bit high. Who owns this business? She said, my father. I said, oh, does your father ever get cranky? She said, yeah, when the bank manager rings him. I said, I can understand why. There's a lot of money tied up in debtors. Who's your accountant? And she told me the accountant's name. And I knew that particular gentleman. I struck him in a couple of conferences. And I said, doesn't he ever talk to you about debtors' days outstanding? No, he's very explicit in his engagement with us that he's only there to do the tax return. And we never knew any difference. So that's what he's always done, just the tax return. So then when I ran into him 3 or 4 weeks later in a coffee lounge in his city, I was a bit concerned as to why he was not monitoring these things. And he very clearly and quite bluntly told me that his responsibility was only to prepare the income tax return. And I said, so because the tax office doesn't ask for debtors' days outstanding figure, you don't worry about it? And he said, you're correct there, Peter, and walked off. I've shared that story with you because I hope it's highlighting the need for business health checks to monitor your clients. And if you're not undertaking that work for your client as part of the preparation of an annual set of accounts and an income tax return, I hope that you will do so if you're offering advisory services to help your clients better understand. Because the business I was talking about was headed for a lot of problems. They had an enormous amount of money owing to them. Another area that normally doesn't get looked at by an accountant in the engagement with a client basically on taxation is to look at how the pricing's done, to sit down with a client and do a pricing review. Now, in ESS BizTools, we've got calculators for tradies to calculate a charge-out rate. We put in their targeted profit, their overheads, their expected productivity percentages, the holidays, the pays, all that, and we calculate. It takes not very long once you put that data in, and it gives the charge-out rates, which the client can then sit back and look at and say, well, how about we put another $50,000 profit in? Because I think I can have charge-out rates a bit higher than that. And we can do that very quickly. We've got a calculator which will do the same exercise basically for professional service firms and for manufacturing businesses. And we have a variation of it which looks at retailers and wholesalers, because they've got to look at their product mixes. They've got all these various products. Some are stars, they're high markups, and there's high volume. But others are cash cows. There's lots of them, but very low markup. But businesses need to have them. What's all this mean in the overall pricing exercise? Our charge-out rate calculators, which you just put the data in on your computer into the Excel spreadsheet, and it calculates all this for you very quickly. And then we have some supporting documentation so that you will then make sure that the key information's then being monitored. We've got one subscriber who, when he first came to talk to us, had about 20 tradie clients. And he said, I've heard you've got a charge-out rate calculator. I got told by one of my clients that one of their mates is using your system. And I thought I better get it. He's now got 120. He tells me when he was just doing the tax return, he was charging about $1,500 for the tax return. He's now charging $10,000 to $12,000 for the total package. So he's created $1 million worth of activity in the tradie sector. How many tradie clients have you got? Could you develop this sort of activity for them? And what he's developed is his own internal benchmarking exercise, because he's got so many electricians, so many plumbers, so many carpenters, put them together. And he said it's an interesting exercise just to put them all into one and give them a report and say, on average, this is what's happening. For tradies, there's about 250 tradies classifications in Australia. Last time I checked, might even be more. It's a great opportunity for you to help a group of people. And then what our current subscriber did was start preparing monthly accounts because he wanted to do a monitoring of their actual performance and highlight it to them. And obviously, if productivity had changed for one or two people, to say to the client, well, we need to redo the figures because you might not be charging out enough for these people because something's changed. We did the original budget on 85% productivity, but you've now agreed that that was overstated and it should only be around 70%. Well, we need to do some changes. It's too late to go back on the work that's been done, but it's not too late for future work. Hopefully, the marketplace will allow you to do that. Systems and automation are very important in every business. What could be done another way? We've all heard of AI and systems, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about it in the future. But there might be things in your business already that you could be changing for the benefit of your clients and in the client's business as well to improve their performance. One of the big things I think we've got to be very mindful of in running a business and helping your clients is what's their future funding requirements going to be? When are they going to need money? We're living in very difficult situations because whilst Australia's at the bottom of the world and we're potentially or hopefully away from any of the major blow-ups that seem to be occurring, we are very reliant on ships being able to bring produce into Australia and to take produce overseas. So what that means is these wars being fought in Europe and the Middle East and other places cause the shipping companies to change their itineraries, change their routes. And some of these mean that there's delays. Instead of being able to complete a voyage to Australia and return in 4 weeks or 5 weeks, it's now taking a lot longer. So that might mean that your client's starting to say, gee, we need to build up our raw material inventory or our completed product inventory. Just depends on what products your client's buying in. So inventory starting to climb. You need to be monitoring that from a cash flow point of view. What pressure is that going to put because inventory is going up? Because presumably the suppliers overseas still wanted to get paid when they delivered their product to the ships. Not their fault that ships aren't calling as often to pick up product, and therefore they've been waiting for their payments. So you need to be looking at that forward cash flow all the time. There are opportunities, of course, for a company to get additional funding. It might be loan funds, but is there security available, or is it a sum of money that's needed that perhaps the lender doesn't need security? Or is there the opportunity to look at raising capital as a crowdsourced funding equity raising company? If your client's turnover is under $25 million Australian on a worldwide basis, value of assets less than $25 million on a worldwide basis, not listed on a stock exchange anywhere in the world, they can potentially raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period from the market called crowdsourced funding equity raising. It's been running now for about 9 years. Over $440 million has been raised. It's an opportunity worth thinking about. And there's Section 708, which has been around, or its predecessors in the state legislation, been around for many years, whereby a company can raise up to $2 million from 20 investors in 12 months. They can't market or promote it, but it's an opportunity. Please think about helping your clients, and that's one of the reasons for the regular review of the financial accounts to analyse what's happening. So all these services should be put into a system, documented, with the timelines also inserted so that they can be followed up. Business health checks, monthly key performance indicator reviews, some strategic planning sessions. What's the cash flow forecast show that's going to be the position in 7, 8, 9 months' time? What funding applications could be made? Getting ready to raise crowdsourced funding equity raising will take a few months. You need to make sure your client understands what the processes are and what information needs to be disclosed, to understand what the role, the duty and the responsibilities and the powers of a crowdsourced funding intermediary are, if your client's going to be dealing with them. So hopefully that gives you an overview of these processes, which are an important part of this overall service of offering to your clients financial, commercial, management accounting advisory services. The preparation of the financial accounts on a regular basis gives that information. The information is a byproduct flow of vital information that can be utilised to assist your client to survive. Now, within ESS BizTools, we've got full packages on every item that I've discussed with you, so that our members are able to download those resources and utilize them to assist their clients to be able to run effective businesses, to survive the challenges that are very evident in the marketplace at present. There's been more failure occurred in the last 12 months than ever before. That's affecting business operations. The government's appointed small business ombudsman, very concerned about what's happening to small businesses all around Australia. They need your input, your assistance, your knowledge, your skills to help them run better businesses. So we have a special webinar on Thursday, the 14th of August at 11 a.m. AEST, where we're going to look at some of the key issues confronting businesses: cash flow forecasting, high impact KPIs, practical business planning, and the rhythm of structured meetings, why they are so important to help the SME community better direct their businesses and operate efficiently. You can visit our website to see the material which we have. Just go to www.essbiztools.com.au. If you have any questions that you'd like answered in these segments, whereby we have this weekly podcast reflecting issues confronting accountants, bookkeepers, business advisors, and virtual chief financial officer services, please send them to me. Or if you're an SME operator that are watching this podcast and you got some problems about your business and you're not getting service from your accountant, you can send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I will try to have a discussion with some accountants to make sure that those services are available to assist you. Thank you for your interest in the products produced by ESS BizTools. I look forward to talking to you again next week when we discuss issues that we have identified within Accountants Minute. Stay safe. Have a great day. Goodbye.